what really shifted us was during the pandemic, and then George Floyd. It became like an exponential shockwaves
Yeah.
during when people were definitely unnerved because of the pandemic, and you know they were shut down, they were locked up, their kids couldn't go to school, their businesses were closed. It was a very traumatic. I don't know if we're going to know for decades the exact ramifications to society and to individuals and groups and different social strata or different economic levels. What happened to these people? But at the same time, you had the shockwave on the shockwave of George Floyd, and then what happened there, and then the grifters on top of that movement that really saw the opportunity to kind of undermine Western civilization and language and education, and they went for it, and there really wasn't a check and balance at that time, and people were scared, they were vulnerable, they were cowed, they were, if you argued against any part of it, you were denounced and demonized, and it became an era then, and hopefully it'll end soon, where disagreement wasn't just I have a different idea and I have a different opinion. If you had a different opinion or a different idea, you were a bad person.
That seems like the biggest shift that's happened in this new era is like the extent to which it used to be just on the outer edges that it was like, oh well, you're a Nazi. Now it's like you're a Nazi.
And that word got stretched pretty thin, right?
You're a Nazi.
You were a Nazi if you joined the National Socialist Party. You had Mein Kampf on your dining room table, and that you said Heil Hitler, and you hated Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals, and did things about it, and actively spoke it, and then pursued that. And then it went from there to like this guy's not wearing a mask. He's a Nazi. I mean, that's a big leap. So I think the value of certain words became devalued, to say, and the weaponization of language. I mean, like it's when you say social justice, who would be against social justice? And then, you realize, as my good friend Andrew Doyle says, and James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, these are real intellectuals. They say, well, these are Trojan horse terms. So it sounds good, but the idea is once you open up the Trojan horse, you go, well, this is communism in here. What are they talking about? This is racist. This is racism. They're talking about.
There's that clip of your good friend Norm MacDonald. I
Yeah,
don't remember
Norm,
where this was even from.
Norm. Yeah.
That sounds like some commie gobbledygook. It was like some. I think it was.
Norm would hate that I'm talking about this stuff. He would absolutely hate it. That's what anybody wants, a smart comedian, serious comic. Yeah, who wants that? Let's go see that serious comedian. But I don't want to be relegated as just a comedian. I'm a human being. And at a point, people want to ask my opinion, I'm going to give it. I think this woke ideology, which again borders on has religious architecture to it, will collapse because, and I'm just tell people, because they go, what do you mean collapse? And I said, no, it's going to fall because the underpinnings behind it isn't the same as Christianity. I mean, you see some Greek monks in a monastery that's been there since the 13th century, 900 years. And it's an order, and they do this on Mondays, and and then Tuesdays they get up and they have this, and this one monk does this, and they've been doing it for almost a millennium now. And there is a purpose behind that. Whereas in the 1960s you had communes. You're gonna like, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if we all lived together for a little bit? 6 months later, wouldn't it be a great idea if we didn't live all together? We didn't live together. What if I didn't see you ever again? But so in very much the same way, this woke philosophy doesn't have the same underpinnings as Christianity. Christianity, its core is love, love your enemy, love others as thyself, forgiveness, sacrifice. These are something you can build hope. You can build your life around. This is something that is beneficial to everyone. Whereas this woke philosophy seems to be based on creating division, separating yourself from everyone else.
Yeah.
dividing and conquering, and at its essence, it seems to be vengeful or revenge for people who didn't ever feel like they fit in, and now they have the upper hand or trying to. Now, that's nothing to build a movement on that seems like it'll last, like a 900-year-old Greek monastery.
One thing that is interesting to me is that it does seem like you are part of a comic community that I wonder if this is a generational thing. Like Seinfeld, Sandler, Norm, the old SNL, like the heyday of SNL.
Grizzled veterans.
Well, like when SNL was really like consistently funny and we all watched it.
But thank you. But at the same time, I remember all I remember is people telling us how much we sucked, like Saturday Night Live's dead and all that.
Bring back
every
Steve
generation. Yeah, every generation. I mean, thank you, but I think they got a good crew now. And I thought the Kate McKinnon crew. I thought like you had Will Ferrell. I mean, it's so. I think it's. If that was where you grew up, or that was your formative years, that's yours, And it was a great place to start. I will say that, and it's a great place that when something's happening in America, like an election or something, there's no better place to go to kind of get a gauge on the, and a lot of that's responsible to this one guy named Jim Downey who did most of the political commentary on that show for years.
It does seem like in a world where the entertainment industry has always been broadly Democrat, left of center.
Oh, yeah, and it should be. I mean, it should be because it's young people doing it.
Right.
And it's like, traditional liberalism is pretty good. Traditional liberalism, not how it's been misused, how we went from women's rights to men, playing playing basketball against women, I don't know how that seems.
We're getting into fights with women, which is my particular favorite. How that's defensible by any.
I know, and it's like, and I feel sorry. You know, what I feel sorry for more than the woman in the rings. The announcers pretending this is okay. Hey, well, what a tremendous breaking barriers there, and he broke her jaw. I mean, she broke her jaw. So you have to ridicule it at this point. You have to laugh at it. It's the only chance for it to collapse, and I do think it will collapse. But I think going back to what you're saying about. I think young people, traditional liberalism, gay rights, women's rights, expanding freedom, free speech. I mean, these are, traditional, as much equality as you can get. This sounds like good stuff. Don't judge people by the color of their skin. That's a good bedrock foundation to build your society on. And we had it. And then someone suddenly said we didn't have it. It's like, we didn't have it? And it was there under the Obama administration where it started to become... Whereas I think it was kind of proof that we'd moved in the right direction. Here's the electorate, voting for, and two times, and then all of a sudden we were more racist now than we were. So I think again it was people were abusing the system that gave rise to an incredible amount of freedom and the greatest experiment of freedom in the history of the world. But it does make it vulnerable to attack, and that's where you're seeing an attack on the Western civilization now.
A friend of mine made a documentary a bunch of years ago called Can We Take a Joke? And he's a big Lenny Bruce fan.
Okay.
I think he might have even been in this movie. It's been a while since I've seen it. But, Seinfeld's been out saying, like, comedy's dead. There's no comedy anymore.
I don't agree with that.
I was curious what you think about that. Because
I think it's just you have to be more clever about it. I mean, like, there's a really great comedian. I don't know if a comedian ever, funnier or more outrageous than Sarah Silverman. She's the complete opposite politically how I stand now. But the way that she communicates ideas is absolutely brilliant. And she gets to ideas by getting the audience to agree to these horrible places. And you would watch her go, I would never tell a joke about the race in this way. And then she just gets them to go, okay. And then she does it. So it really is in your application and your execution, I should say. I was trying to figure out, one of the great comics of all time, and one of our, certainly for our generation, is Louis C.K.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going like,
oh,
how does he get away with, and you had to look at it, structurally. And I was going like, okay. He gets the audience to be okay with questioning their own lack of morality through his lack of morality. And so it's a clever way to get to talk about interesting stuff and the societal taboos, which Lenny Bruce talked about a comedian from the 1960s, really, which opened up the floodgates to a different, to questioning things that we should question all of it. And I remember, my good friend John Cleese from Monty Python talking about, and him and Eric Idle telling me about Peter Cook and the footlights at, I think it was at Cambridge. Cambridge or Oxford. I think it was the footlights at Oxford, at Cambridge, and they'd never seen anybody make fun of the prime minister or the royal family, and it wasn't even in their thinking that this was a possibility. So, in all deference and respect for Jerry Seinfeld, who's one of the great masters of stand-up comedy of the 20th century, by far. I mean, it's anybody who disagrees with that is not to be taken seriously in comedy. But in all deference to him, I would say we just have to work harder. I mean, I'm out there more because I have to be, but I'm out there more doing more shows. So I have to get things done and bring the audience along in a way that is acceptable to them. And I totally stole this idea from the structural the structure of Louis C.K., which is if I make myself the butt of it, then I can get them to question this this morality, whether no matter what their political leanings. If I can talk about like how I want my son to win at athletics in high school, and he's clearly not talented, but I want him to hold a trophy, and there's a conversation that I give to do with my on stage where I talk about talking to my son about joining the women's team, and it just nobody and, and the audience is really uncomfortable, but they find themselves laughing because of because I make myself all in it, because I'm not talking about them doing it, I'm not talking about a specific person. This is all just this is imaginary. But if you set up the scenario in a way that is purely comic and keep them off guard and make yourself like the bad person in this, and then I think you can get to ideas. So I would say, in all respect to Jerry Seinfeld, no, you can. I mean, I will say there's certain places I wouldn't do it. I mean, I've had people extremely upset. It's been in the news. That's how you know it is a problem. But I refuse to give into it. But I've been on the news for telling jokes. I mean, how do you get on the news for a joke?
Right.
But that's how shitty the news is, and that's how the place we're at. And I was in Canada recently where it happened. I take that as a badge of honor because I think you have to keep kicking doors down. And even when they were complaining about it, they were also complaining that people were laughing loudly.
Right. Well, because it's a reflection on how horrible we all are.
Yes, it is. Like, these people are laughing at this. He's encouraging their hate, and I go, no, I don't think so. I think, we're adults in a room talking about something that I think they're finding some relation to. And the idea is to, it's not to attack specific things, but to attack some sort of something that is deserving of ridicule.
I've tended to think that there's sort of two paths that most comedy tries to take.
There's more than that.
But hear me out. You're the because you're the expert.
I feel like I'm talking to the Ayatollah. There's two.
Yes, there is two. Well, one is to sort of revel in like what is super super familiar. Like, I watched your Woke Up in America special.
Well, thank you.
So much of it is about like being married and being asked to go kill a spider. Like, that literally happened.
Yeah.
Like me and Lisa shut off the TV. She goes into the bathroom, screams, and says, "There's a spider."
It's consistently the biggest laugh in my show, which has nothing to do with politics, but it has to do with sexual politics and power, and the fact that a guy can be just as scared of a spider or more so than a woman. And I think there's some people can relate to that. All of them. Everyone can relate to that. And it's a scream of a laugh, which is fantastic. I mean, I wish I had more of those kind of jokes. But what's interesting is that there seems to be a deliberate emasculation happening in society and in show business I just saw this movie by John Krasinski which is brilliant. Those movies, A Quiet Place, are absolutely brilliant. And like he is a guy who is a hero for actors, saying don't just be an actor, be a producer, be a writer, be a director, do all these things and make something, you make a hit, and God bless him, and marry the most beautiful woman in acting. You know, a real hero for all of us actors. But then he made this new one, and if I may, respectfully be disrespected now, he made the guy scared and like frightened and screaming, and the woman covering his mouth and like, and just totally emasculated this guy, and like the woman takes off his sweater and gives it to the guy, and it's a total demasculating this a man as entertainment, and I found that to be like, come on, yeah, why am I, and I don't think that that's a singular exception in show business now, and as the arbiter of societal trending, I think they are making a choice here that men can be just as weak and useless, and which feeds back into the thing which is my trigger, which is this idea of toxic masculinity. Yes. Do you like the way the air conditioning works in this place, or the fact that the building isn't collapsing? Well, that's toxic masculinity. That's guys who probably didn't, the guys who did the work probably wanted to not go to college or whatever. They wanted to work with their hands, or they didn't want to wait, like I didn't want to finish college. I wanted to be a comedian. I wanted to get out of there. And like, but what runs society, plumbing, welding, it's not toxic masculinity. It's men accomplishing shit that needs to get done. And if it doesn't get done, everything falls apart. And so to attack that as if there's something wrong with that is, to me, that is objectionable. That to me is deserving of ridicule.
It does feel like there's this sort of thing that's baked into like what progressivism wants to do, which is to say it's not good enough to tolerate the people on the edges. We have to flatten the curve, so to speak.
Yeah.
The bell curve of reality, which is actually like most people are going to be comfortable in this thing that looks pretty much like normal life, men and women, relationships, concerns. And we should want to tolerate the people who don't want that, but instead it's got to be like, no. We have to destroy that. There has to be no norms.
Exactly. Well, Thomas Sowell talks about it much clearer than I do in his book, The Fallacy of Social Justice. It's the idea of flattening out some people so that other people can benefit from it. There's the idea that there can be equality of outcome is illusory, because there's certain people that are going to be better at making beer. The Germans have been doing it for 1,000 years. They're going to make it better. The opportunity, the idea that Filipinos are going to just jump in and take over the beer business. It's 1,000 years we've been making beer. We don't know what they're doing, And there's
I wouldn't write off the Koreans. They're pretty good at catching up.
Yeah, fast. but they learned from the German. What was built by the Germans. So there's just the idea that you don't have the same outcomes in the same family. So there's this myth, this mythology, and the idea of doing something good. And it's like, just reminds me of like nature. We need to get rid of these squirrels. We got to bring in from that little island those little badgers that kill the squirrels. We'll bring him, and then they come in and they don't kill the squirrels. They kill all the sheep, or whatever. They just fuck it up every chance they get. So I guess it has to be functional. It has to be tried, and you have to look at this instead of these big sweeping measures that, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It doesn't work. I mean, the idea of, they want diversity of skin color, but not idea. They don't want the diversity of ideas or ideology or anything. They just want to look different. But they don't. God forbid if you're a different color, but you're thinking differently, then you're out. Then you're then they have other derogatory terms for you. So I don't know. My mom was Filipino. My dad was Jewish. So I never felt included anywhere with anything. It's kind of always felt like an outsider, and I always questioned things, and I never included in any group, and I felt like an outsider, and I felt like as a stand-up I'm an outsider. I felt as my stand-up career as an outlier. I'm outside of it, and I don't feel beholden to any of it. And I think that's the proper place to be. I do think I'm pigeonholed now as in this, because particularly I feel I've never felt the underpinnings of what made this country so great. Like as Washington would say, that there's a reason why freedom of speech is the First Amendment, because all the other ones are relying on it. And that was even before guns. I mean,
Right.
a lot of people, guns first. What are you talking about? Freedom of speech. Let's do the guns.
We needed the guns to defeat the British.
But he said that freedom of speech, that was first. I mean, there's some. I mean, these that wasn't taken lightly. So the real the arms that we have, the real armament that is society has been gifted by that incredible document, was freedom of speech. So that's the arming of the citizenry.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.